the first presenter for today, Obhinobo and Aviral from Postman. Floor is all yours. I'm sure we have all heard Postman. We've used it. We probably don't realize that Postman is one of the super popular startups started from Bangalore. So please put your hands together for Postman, everyone.
Good morning, guys. Am I audible? Yeah. Cool. So if you're wondering like what happened to my hand, right? So I was in a bike trip in Nepal and I fell down. And actually I didn't evaluate and tested the clutch plate. And that's the story for Postman so far. Like we move fast and broke things. So hi, this is Abhinav Ghosh. And I'm the engineering manager at Quality Platform in Postman. And you can follow me in my Twitter. So Postman, what we do, Postman is the API platform, and it's not just API testing tool. So it covers the API lifecycle, that is from designing, development, deployment, and observation, and obviously also testing. And what we do inside Postman, we are a part of broader quality. This quality platform team is a part of broader engineering platform team. So we mainly focused on best-in-class test tooling and enablement so that we can help different teams to test better. I will come to the operating model later. But this is our how we operate at Postman. So very interestingly, Postman doesn't have any dedicated QA engineer. So we believe quality is everyone's responsibility. That is the reason we chosen it very, very carefully. Like we as a platform team, we will enable every developer so that they can test faster. The testing is intuitive for them and it comes naturally. So it is very difficult to implement that kind of mindset inside the organization, and that is something that we are working for last 2.5 years now inside Postman to establish that principle, because we believe if the developers are not engaged into the whole quality assurance process, they cannot feel the pain, and thus the best quality outcome products cannot become. And we are operating as a startup within a startup. That means our quality platform team always engages with our internal developers, external users, understand the pain points, deliver it, and help excel the quality engineering process. We focused on enablement and onboarding and best practices, and also high-touch partnerships with different squads. And this is our operating model. We have a quality engineering team. This is the platform team. We have the partners. Whatever quality platform team builds, the partner helps the development team to consume those tooling and infrastructure. And we have a quality rate team that focuses on chaos engineering and how to break production, so that we can bring more insights like what is happening with the real users and bring that knowledge back and build the robust automation and testing strategy to protect those. So what is the problem, right, inside Postman? We have seen our user reported bugs and incidents keep increasingly growing, starting from 2021 and even back, right? And there is a high defect leakage, degraded customer experience all over the places. Twitters and LinkedIn's were flooded hey, Postman is not working, my workflow is breaking, and etc. And what we have observed, that high code to customer time, that when we are building things, we are the developer pushing the commit. From that time, the product is reaching to the production. There is a high elevated time on that because of degraded experience in validating the features. It was taking high time, multiple hot fixes, and Postman is distributed across web, different desktop platforms, different desktop architectures, and also in VS Code, right? So the manual validation time was so much that this code to customer time was sometimes it was so painful that we actually, our go-to-market strategy was for a specific date, but it also happened that we need to have 3 to 4 days more just to be in the market because of our slow validation time. So what is the challenges in test automation specifically? So as I say, Postman is running in very high velocity, different monthly releases, thousands of commits per week, hundreds of deployments. And then there is a very like architectural mesh, and it is a coexistence of monolith, micro frontends, and microservices. Postman is, as I said, like the biggest challenge was like Postman is distributed across different platforms, different OS architectures, and validating that multiple times for multiple hotfixes, incidents, bug fixes. It's a big challenge for us. And most importantly, Postman is a plethora of like mutually exclusive apps. If you see like Postman runtime and desktop agent versus the Postman flows, which is a canvas driven application, then we have live collection, which is SDK based, we have CLI, we have API network, which is intelligence driven, and the Postman enterprise reports, like that is very charts and graphs. So there is a very mutually exclusive array of products that is inside Postman, and it was always challenge that there is no singular testing strategy that can help to automate this kind of complex platform. So what was our mental model? So first of all, we have migrated our like testing pyramid pattern to the newer version of automation model that is called the Postman testing trophy. So we majorly focus in the static layer, where we have Sonar, we have TypeScript right now, because we have seen our backend issues, that was the different crash reports were happening for 40% of errors was completely gone, because we have now TypeScript in place, we have Flow and SonarQube, and our static code analysis actually able to catch 40% of the crash reports. Then we have unit testing layer. We are not focusing in unit testing much, because what we have observed that even 80 or 90% of unit testing doesn't provide that value, because we are always keep losing the fact how the developers or in the world, how they are thinking about using the product. So even if we are missing something or we are increasing the code coverage to a like far extent, but it doesn't matter that it actually covers the behavioral aspect of the product. So we mostly focus on the integration layer, where in the UI side we use Jest and React testing library to test the React component of it, and in backend we use Postman for API contract testing. And here we have seen the majority of the defects occurred when we integrate multiple components together. And then we have an end-to-end layer where the real end-to-end complex user flows that are getting automated. Yeah, so this is our end-to-end testing model and infrastructure. So as I said, right, first of all, which workflows are considered to be an end-to-end use case, right? So we have a real-time monitoring data that we capture to validate, okay, which workflows are mostly getting used by the developers, right? And what is the most used workflow? So how you can concentrate, like there are n number of possibilities that you can automate, but where you should focus, right? So we have observed some workflows are only getting used by hundreds of people, where different workflows are used by millions of people. So that is coming from the real-time data. So we have a solution is in place which can help us smartly identify where the focus should be. And after we get the workflows that needs to be automated, we have built a teleport layer, because our use cases are so vast that it is not only web, it is different desktop platforms and VS Code plugins also. So this teleport will have all the utilities in place that the developers write the code once, but teleport will make sure like that specific code, test code, can be executed across platforms, right? So they don't need to maintain different tests for different platforms to be executed. So we use Circle CI infrastructure mostly to have the machines in place, browser in place, and at the end of the day, we leverage AWS capabilities like Lambdas, Beanstalk, and Secret Manager to keep protecting the data, because test data is a major part. Because Postman is very unique, because we don't know how the developers will consume Postman, because Postman having an API, having a CLI, and also Postman as a platform. So we absolutely don't know how it is getting used. So we also leverage the real-time data to figure out how our test data manager should create the data according to the real usage of the product. And then we also use our visual regression testing. We are having Apply tools integrated. We are also having accessibility test report because we believe like Postman should be accessible for everybody. And also it reports to New Relic, Slack, and our internal dashboards because we always keep tracking the data, how we're improving and improving on that. Then the non-functional testing part. Sorry. Can you come to the question? Yeah. Thank you. So the non-functional testing of it, like as I said, like accessibility is a major concern. We do a lot of manual validation as well as we have integrated Axe and Jext inside our design system. So our design system is called Ether. So we are planning to also make it open source someday, hopefully. And also we are having Playwright Axe to drive the accessibility test end to end. By the way, this Playwright Axe is an open source package now. You can go and check it out, and it is getting some love right at this moment. So we are also very much right now focusing on the performance aspect of it, and Postman newly launched is performance testing feature. If you don't know, like just go and have a look at it. So what we do, we also do the real user monitoring. That I said, like we have utilities in place which will provide us the data where the users are facing this real-time slowness, right? And then we have a app launch, memory analyzer. We also consider the bundle size because sometimes our users are, actually posting the screenshot how Postman bundle size is increasing compared to other apps, and that is slowing their machines down. We also do so our Postman is a WebSocket based or WebSocket heavy calls. So we also do WebSocket call audit. That okay, how many WebSocket calls are happening for a single request? Sometimes we say like there are like n numbers of calls happening, but the call needs to be happening. It's just once, right? So that was slowing the system down. Then we are also evaluating system latency. In the client side of it, we still use Playwright, and we are integrating Lighthouse to it to validate what is the performance score. But in the server side, mostly we are using Postman. We started using Postman. Now, how Postman uses Postman internally, right? So all of our developers, and it is a very like default language of us, to first design the API, right? So Postman has an API platform. So if you go to the left sidebar of Postman, you'll see an API pop up over there. So if you click the API, so you can actually design the Open API specs, and starting from the design phase, we develop the API. Most importantly, we document the API and we host the API to our internal private API network. So everybody inside Postman, developers, quality engineers, product managers, every functions of it can have a singular place of API construct where they can go and understand, like as a quality engineer or the people who are writing test, it is a very important for them to understand what the API is designed for, and our API network is greatly helping on that. And also what we have done right at this moment is after each and every deployment, we have the AWS architecture that fires and Lambda. That Lambda triggers the API Postman, whatever the API test we have written, and it validates the bill. It sends the notification to the proper channel. And that is how we write the test. And after each and every deployment, beta stage and prod, we fire the Postman API test and get the feedback out of it. Now, we have majorly invested on the shift left principles. So what we have done previously, that we have always blocked our stage, because in our feature branches only like static lean test and unit test was happening, but mostly after getting feature batch getting merged to the develop branch, we used to perform a lot of tests over there, and always we figured out like, hey, like issues in the very late life cycle, right? And the developers were saying like, hey, why can't I get this feedback early in my code base, right? So to not becoming staging as a bottleneck, what we have done is shifting left all the validations right at this moment, including end-to-end test in the commit level. So whenever the developers are committing, all these tests right at this moment are performing in their feature branches, blocking the feature to getting merged to the develop. So what we have done out of it, previously our develop branch health was in and around 20 or 30%, but right now we are having 99% health because we have shifted left. And very importantly, this piece, selective test execution, actually helped us a lot. So what we have done, like end-to-end tests, there are like 2,000 end-to-end tests right at this moment, so that cannot be executed in your pipeline. So what we have done for end-to-end test, unit test, integration test, we have created a selective test execution bot that validates what based on your change log, what tests needs to be performed, right? So at actually execute that specific test. So we also build testability for very start of the development journey, creating selector strategy, and also build internal APIs for data ingestions, right? Those are very important. Like sometimes developer don't focus on creating the testability in their system. They move fast, but we also, because this shift left principle actually help them to think test first, right? They are also figuring out, hey, I am developing this feature, but I don't have the right test data for it. So sometimes they create internal APIs for the data ingestion part. And also we are having the nightly runs, which can help us to evaluate the health of this development master. So what's the impact that we are seeing out of this automation, right? So we are seeing like our month over month, our user reported bugs are going down slightly, and we are keep improving our practices, because automation alone cannot help you to reduce the defects. You need to build an overall testing strategy, and automation is a part of it. And we are seeing a outward trend on catching bugs early in the cycle. Like this is the chart where we have figured out bugs even before the product shipped to the production. So this is very, this is one of the metric that we are tracking very closely. Our feature release velocity have increased. Like previously, like 2 years ago, it was like 40-50% because of the slow validations, but right now we have increased it to the 94% top mark. And our validation time has reduced, and also our like maintenance time test, because we have shipped it left. So all the test maintenance, because that is the problem, like you see with the end-to-end test or like integration test, the test always are flaky because somebody changes some selector and all. But now as we have shipped it left, if the developers are changing any selectors, they are figuring it out, and our maintenance have reduced. I think we have the last slide over there. What's next for us? We are constantly having our focus on AI, and Postman is like in couple of days you will hear a note from Postman that we have released a post bot that is an AI assistant of Postman that helps you to create test APIs smartly, efficiently with just generative comments. We are also invested in predictive bug analysis, RC analysis, and improve the reliability of the test through some AI investment. We are also right now making tests more simpler, and also what we have learned throughout the process that Postman internally is not sharing the success stories in the community, how we are testing internally, and that will double down our effort to build these user stories next. Yeah, so that's it. So if you have any questions, yeah.
You said about identifying tests based on change log. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So what was happening previously is we have a lot of tests, like 2,000 end-to-end tests. There are 8,000 unit tests, around 10,000 integration tests and stuff. So if we execute that with the PR pipeline, so we have seen the developers need to wait for like 1 hour to 1.5 hours of time just to get their PR validated. And when the developer raises a PR, there is not a single commit. They will keep continuously adding commits, and it will keep continuously increasing the time and increasing the credit usage as well. So it's a cost aspect is also there. So what we have developed is creating a smart analyzer which will analyze based on like, okay, as a developer, I just only changed few components, and it will evaluate like based on those components, what are the tests are there that needs to be executed. So that actually reduce the feedback time, reduce the cost, and developers only consider like, hey, the tests I am running. So sometimes if we run all the tests and some tests are failing, people are saying like, hey, this is an unrelated test that is failing in my pipeline. What I'll do with that, right? But now, as the tests are targeted, even if the test fails, they exactly know, like, okay, this change caused this test failure, so I need to go and triage and fix the failure.
What's the impact of that 2 hour time to change applying
Yeah, so it is around like 70% or 80% of the improvement right now. Our pre-integration pipeline that is coming along with our like feature development. So that is right now in and around 13 minutes plus 5 minutes for end-to-end test execution. So that is something that we have achieved.
You told that the unit testing was not so effective.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it is not about unit testing. So can you go? Can we go back?
We come back to this.
Yeah. So what we have believed previously that we have analyzed the code and analyzed the unit test. We have taken some time over there. So what we have observed that a specific component or specific unit test was written in a way that it only evaluates the implementation details, right? But what we have figured out that if the user is using that component differently, that unit test still passes, but the expectation fails. To give you the exact example of it, there has been a component in Postman API platform where the developer written a unit test to check the button is clicked, and based on that he was asserting on true and false outcome. But what we have observed, if the button is integrated to the header and then user clicks it, it fails. So the unit test was passing, but when the actual button was placed in a way that it should be, and the developers are not consuming the button in isolation, they're consuming the button in the header component. So when we integrated that, it started failing. So that's the level of challenges. Like previously, like, hey, all the unit test is passing, but still when we observed in the end-to-end layer, we have seen it is failing. But what we have observed that you don't need to be in the end-to-end layer creating a real user, consuming all the APIs to just test it. What do you do? Take the button component, take the header component, integrate it, drive a test, and you get the outcome. So our main focus, as you said, like the cost and the speed boundary, right? So what will give you the most impact or most confidence, right, is end-to-end test. No doubt, because end-to-end test is the test how the product will be consumed by the end user. But you cannot focus here because the cost and the speed aspect is very high of it, right? So what is the balance that you can prevail in your testing strategy is building the confidence. Test the APIs in isolation as it will be consumed, and test the components in isolation, in integration of each other, and test it. So this is the strategy that we are right now following. And with the React testing library, you can actually drive the test from the behavioral standpoint. Like it's not a just implementation, it is validation. You can actually render the component or components and then test it through text, and how we do it exactly in the end-to-end test, you can drive that test like that.
Thank you, Vinoba.
Yeah.
And Aviral for the presentation.
So I think he was asking for long, so can we get one last one question?
30
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah.
So what is called the teleport layer, and how does it use like and how do you manage such a large traffic to replay for the testing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna let Aviral speak about it just for 30 seconds because it is very important aspect. So teleport is a layer for our wrappers for different tools. So the developer, let's suppose there is a click method. Developer doesn't need to understand this click method is coming from which tool, right? Is it WebDriver IO? Is it Playwright? Is it some like Selenium? They don't need to understand it. And we switch the tools based on our platforms, right, where the tests are getting executed, because one tool cannot perform the execution in multiple layers, right? So this is just a wrapper. So even if we change the tool layer someday, the test will still be operating fine, because it creates an unified APIs, click, text, add text, like that. But developer doesn't need to know what's the implementation behind it. But for the real-time data, I just give him like 20 seconds to talk about it because it's a very complex aspect.
So basically in teleport, we are abstracting these functions like basically save, click, test, and other like hover functions. So as Abhi said, that we need not to worry about the implementation of that particular function. So those all particular functions implementation lies in another repo, which is called teleport, and we are importing it as a npm package in our monolith repo, which is Postman app.
So can we elaborate on the real-time data?
So basically we create real-time data. So let's say we want to test a user flow. So what we do, we create a user from scratch. So those credentials we create from AWS, like basically AWS, and then use those credentials to log in and then perform the user flow. So everything we are performing in our end-to-end testing is performed from scratch, just like the user would do. So replicating the user flow.
This data is mostly coming from our analytics platform. Like all the analytics, like Google Analytics tool and everything that we have in place.
I take all of them.
Yeah, sure.
Can we move to slide, the feedback slide,
Yeah.
please? Please scan the QR code, folks. We have 45 seconds. Thank you again, Vinova.
Thanks everybody. Thanks a lot for having us.